So I just played a AAA game that pretty much nobody has played and was never actually released. Quake 4 The Awakening was a canceled expansion that never saw the light of day, despite being what appears to be about 95% complete. It was canceled by Activision in 2006 because the base game failed to meet sales expectations. But recently, a build of The Awakening was discovered on a used PC bought off Amazon, and the files have made their way online. So what you're looking at is a fully playable build of the entire expansion from 20 years ago that you can go and download for yourself. It of course varies in quality, with some levels feeling like a fully polished experience to, well, this. But it's still a fascinating and incredibly rare look at what could have been, especially since this game was so far along in development. Let's take a look at Quake 4's canceled expansion. Now, just for some context here, if you're not intimately familiar with the Quake franchise, this was such a massively important game franchise that not only played a major role in popularizing the arena shooters, which evolved into many other games over the years, but it was also one of the first early popular multiplayer FPS games and a base engine that was used for endless mods and evolutions to the FPS, used to create things like Team Fortress. And Quake 4 was an attempt to bring the franchise back into the limelight during a time in which the tactical FPS dominated, and well, frankly still does. And unsurprisingly, Quake 4 did not do well. It wasn't a bad game, but it felt a bit stuck in the past, attempting to bring the franchise back to a single-player experience with the Strogg alien narrative that frankly never really got that popular compared to other epic sci-fi games. And after the game launched, it got a few updates, and then the devs quietly moved on to other projects. It wasn't until 2018 when one of the game's developers posted screenshots of models made for the expansion that anyone in the public even knew that there had been an expansion in development. But then a couple of weeks ago, a game dev totally unrelated to the project named Justin Marshall released an alpha build of the expansion on GitHub that he says he discovered on a used vintage computer he bought from Amazon. The files are now publicly available, and all you need to do is drop them into a Quake 4 install and use the included batch file to launch the expansion. You'll need to do some tinkering to set the resolution and other graphics options via a config file, since I don't think Quake Tweaker works on this build of the game, but it's pretty basic stuff. And once I got it up and running, well, the opening chapters of the expansion feel quite polished and good enough, frankly, to be on store shelves. In fact, there's already a mod in active development attempting to restore all of the missing content in The Awakening and patch all of its bugs. And the expansion starts with you getting dropped off alongside a squad of Marines to infiltrate a Strogg processing plant. The facility is guarded by these massive Strogg spider-like mechs and of course tons of grunts. And despite some hints in the opening cutscenes that the devs weren't exactly finished scripting things out, the opening of the expansion is otherwise rock solid. And the gameplay is pretty good, at least for this era of game. Nothing groundbreaking, but the Quake 4 arsenal like machine gun, shotgun, and hyper blaster all melt enemies and are still very satisfying to use. It was actually impressive how dynamic the opening mission felt, getting dropped off and watching the bodies of Marines go flying in the explosions as the Strogg push back against the assault. The level does quickly turn into a corridor shooter, but there's still fun sections like a bit where you drive a mech with rockets and machine guns. You also get a new frost gun pretty early on. It slowly freezes enemies, letting you shatter them with a few shots from another gun. It's mostly a gimmick gun as the game makes you use it to put out fires, but it is fun to mess around with it here and there. It can also freeze boss enemies, which, well, we'll get to. Now, I'm not going to lie, the second mission is definitely less engaging and starts to show some of the bigger signs of unfinished work. It's mostly an on-rails air raid mission where you have to defend your ship using turrets from the Strogg forces. At first, it's pretty fun, but it just kind of keeps going on and not adding a lot to the sequence. And I want to be careful here not to criticize unfinished work. That is totally unfair to the developers. In fact, I actually find it really interesting to see a project in this stage of development, because you could easily see them making adjustments from the testing phase, but we get to see it before all the final quality passes were made. And as the game progresses, there's some very impressive levels and fun character arcs quirks and things that really build to it. And even the unfinished rough spots, you can absolutely see where the devs were heading for it. The first boss encounter is one of these situations where you need to defeat this massive monster with multiple bodies sticking out of its back end. Well, the opening cutscene is a bit rough. One of your squad mates gets attacked by the boss, but there's no animation for it. The fight itself is pretty standard stuff. Shoot the big bad guy for a bit, it spawns some ads, and you kill those, and then keep shooting the big bad guy until it dies. And it is missing some animation, so it's unclear if you have to blow off the bodies attached to it to progress, but beyond those issues, it's a really cool enemy design in an otherwise run-of-the-mill boss fight. Now later in the game, most of the characters switch over to being voiced by a single voice actor. Obviously, this is placeholder for the final voice acting, but it's kind of cool seeing the process being laid so bare. One minute this guy will be playing it straight as a Marine, the next he's doing some sort of European accent for Strauss, the next he's an enemy boss. It's just kind of cool. You feel like you're witnessing theater or something.
Anybody successfully connected to that equipment would instantly reveal any key information to the Nexus. Incredible.
I don't believe
Great
it.
job.
Welcome aboard.
Unbelievable. Great job, soldier.
Deckard.
What you and the rest of your squad did today turned the tide of this war.
Now, I did play through the rest of what was offered, and there's a substantial amount there, even if it did kind of break down in a few places and I had to kind of glitch my way through. But what's crazy about it is that from what I know about game development, and I'd like to think I know a bit more than the average person, this expansion was not far at all from being completely finished. There's also some speculation that remake and remaster specialist studio Night Dive has access to an even more finished build of this expansion, which would make sense if this random build came off of a PC. It might not be the most up-to-date build that's out there. So it's kind of crazy to think that it was canceled, and also just makes it that much more of a shame, especially for the developers working so hard on it and getting so close to the final phase. And it has quite a few narrative elements that are pretty key to the lore development of, frankly, a legendary franchise, even if Quake wasn't as well known for its narrative. Mostly for its role in making the arena shooter a huge deal, but it nonetheless feels like we're getting a glimpse of the untold lore from a once great franchise. And the way it ends also suggests that you may have actually dealt the Strogg forces a massive blow that left them vulnerable to a potential defeat. And I gotta say, overall, this expansion was pretty fun. Even in its unfinished state, I felt engaged enough to progress on to each new mission. It definitely would have added a lot to the base game, though they probably wouldn't have had that big of an audience for it. And as somebody who knows a lot of game devs, both from the indie scene and AAA scene, so much of their work on projects gets canceled before anybody in the public ever gets to see it or appreciate it. So these devs work for years, they build something amazing or halfway amazing, and then nobody ever gets to see it because the plug gets pulled for one reason or another. I've heard countless stories of this over the years, and it's always heartbreaking, and it just sucks. It sucks that we accept that as sort of a standard of the industry. So I'm really glad that somebody stumbled on a working build and made it publicly available. The Awakening might be unfinished, but it's 100% worth playing if you're a fan of the franchise or just interested in a behind-the-scenes look at how games get made. There's a link to the GitHub download in the description. Now, believe it or not, this isn't the first time I stumbled across an ancient, hidden Quake game. Did you know they actually made a Quake Battlefield game? Yeah, a few years ago I stumbled across a community that still plays it today, and I was quite surprised with the quality of that game. Find out all about it in this next video, and as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.